just bear with us on that one. We'll release details as soon as we can. Obviously, today's call is with Sebastian. We've got an hour down. It probably won't take that long, but there'll be a bit of chance for questions and answers afterwards and stuff. So feel free to put things in the chat, join the conversation and stuff like that, and we can pick them up either at the end or as we keep going. So yeah. So I was going to say, do you want to introduce yourself, Sebastian?
Yeah, then, I can. Shall I directly share my screen then?
Yeah, go on.
Let's do that. Share. You should be able to see it now.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Sorted itself out.
Perfect. Yeah. So then let's directly dive in. Few things. Organizational topic. I might have to interrupt at a certain point of time to let my daughter in. Had a bit of a misunderstanding with my wife today. So when she's coming from school, I need to let her know how to get in. Other than that, yeah, as mentioned already, have your questions at the end. If you are lost though, like notify me and we get this sorted out. We have plenty of time. I think this presentation is around 30 minutes. So we have plenty of time of Q&A. And if there's something, as I say, where we're completely lost and can't follow the whole track anymore, let me know, because it doesn't make sense to continue that way.
Brilliant.
With already lost? No, sorry. What?
No. I was going to say, crack on. Off you go.
Yeah, right. Okay, so let's get things started. Yeah, welcome everyone to this session about building multi-site implementations at scale with XM Cloud. I did this presentation at Symposium, and I'm happy to do it again for everyone who did not had the chance to attend or attended another breakout session. There were plenty of them. So right, a few words about me. If you don't know me, my name is Sebastian. I'm a technical product marketer. I'm mostly into XM Cloud and SXA and all stuff content related. I've been in IT for more than 20 years and even more than half of it within the Sitecore ecosystem. I'm also coming from the other end of Sitecore, so I've worked for a customer for a very long time. I've been awarded twice for a technology MVP before I joined Sitecore 5 years ago. But yeah, that's all about me. If you want to reach out to me, there are a couple of social channels that you can do so. Watch out for the Love Sitecore handle. It's a bit cheesy, I know, but yeah, it came when I applied for being an MVP. So I kept it since then. Okay, so I believe many of you are working for big enterprise companies that offer services or products, and also your organization might be separated into independently working, for example, brands or even different regions. And let's assume you have markets across the globe, and we know that every region or country works slightly different, right? So you need different ways of communication tailored to the target audiences. Targeting a Japanese market is way different than targeting the UK market, I believe. And dependent on the level of autonomy of your regional offices, every office might run their marketing campaigns and activities, and all of them have set up their own channels. And this can be quite costly when summing everything up, and every entity is developing their own sites and social channels and stuff like that. Now, usually it would make sense then to consolidate the efforts centrally and offer a streamlined solution to every regional office. So you can cut costs on development. You probably don't want to hear that, but that's a thing. You can cut costs on hosting, and you can cut costs on licensing. And with all of these ideas, you now need a vendor that can handle that for you. And no surprise, Sitecore has been always strong in serving enterprise companies with solutions at scale. XP and XM has been leading the market for years, and now XM Cloud continues that route on as a SaaS offering, a software as a service offering. Why am I telling you all of that? Because we had a very similar story when taking a look and re-implementing the SUGCON sites. Now, we all know that the Sitecore community is a huge asset for Sitecore, and since 2014 already, the community takes the effort of running the Sitecore User Group Conference, or a short SUGCON, and most of you are aware of that, I know. And it all started in Utrecht, Netherlands in 2014, and then North America joined in 2015. India became a regular place for SUGCON since 2018, And also Australia, New Zealand is running SUGCON since 2019. But again, of course, each event is different. There are different organizational teams in each regions. There are different agendas, dates, locations, sponsors, you name it. And besides social media, the websites are an important place to get all required informations, like where to get tickets, who's speaking when, what are the dates again, are there any special discounts for hotel bookings, and so on, right? All of that information usually can be found on the website, or should be found on the website. And way back, we built the websites in different Sitecore XP instances, one based on Sitecore 9 using Azure Web Apps, and one on Sitecore 10 hosted on AKS. And the sites were able to be independently managed by each organizational team. So that's where we started off, which is pretty much the story that we can apply to many companies. So in 2022, XM Cloud was released, and we wanted to gain knowledge about about it in the developer advocacy team at Sitecore, ideally by implementing a real-world project. So beside the SUGCON sites that we wanted to re-implement, we also had the MVP site, which was running on .NET at that time. And what we wanted to have is one solution. We wanted to have one XM Cloud instance that serves all the sites, but independent frontend had implementations so that we can still have different UIs if needed to serve basically the autonomy of each site. So the MVP site got implemented or re-implemented using .NET Core, and the SUGCON sites got re-implemented using Next.js. And then there is also a SUGCON umbrella site, which you find under SUGCON.events. And this has been added later on for now as a static HTML site. Not managed by Sitecore, just, as I said, static content. So the build and deployment pipeline was realized with GitHub Actions using the XM Cloud CLI to deploy all different renderings and editing hosts. So this repository, and I will link it later to you, but this has been open source, so you were always able to follow along with having actually a solution in 2022, or I think we released it in 2023, but having a .NET Core application running a site with Next.js application. This has always been a big question, like, can this be done? Can .NET Core be used? Yeah, it always could, with some downsides, but it was always possible, and we did it. However, along the way, maintaining those sites, we learned that the SUGCON sites were never designed differently. So they all remained the same. And as an outcome, like if we found a bug, we had to fix it 4 times, right? We had to fix it in each app separately. And this way, we wanted to improve our maintenance basically by having just one app for all Next.js related sites, and then also includes the umbrella site, the SUGCON.event side, being managed by XM Cloud. So in 2023, we started that re-implementation project, and we were targeting the SUGCON that was held this year in Dublin in April 2024. We still wanted to use XM Cloud. We wanted to have one app in Next.js. We wanted to run the front-end hosting on Vercel. And we wanted to have a team of community members, which you can see here on the slide, bringing different roles, some more front-end focused, some more experience with XM Cloud or the Sitecore ecosystem, some with pure business roles. So very general project setup with very, very general requirements. And all other sites, we wanted to gradually migrate as the events appeared over the year. And one thing was important, we did not want to harm the existing sites, so we implemented everything aside the existing apps, but within the same solution. And also we set up new sites in the same XM Cloud instance, just aside the others, so that we could, at a certain point of time, switch the DNS routing to the new sites and then decommission the old sites and the old apps in the solution. Why am I telling all of that? Just to summarize, there can be 2 ways of architecting your multi-site solution in code, which we tried with 2 implementations, which I mentioned before, right? So on the left-hand side, you can see the one approach where you have dedicated apps per sites, and also a dedicated Vercel project per site. The advantage is that this allows you to have independent development of each site, meaning independent UIs, independent functionality. So if you run independent teams implementing on those apps, that could be a good use case to separate these out. Also, if you have different requirements, very different requirements for each of those, it might make sense to have them separated. But that leads also to a potential duplication of code like we faced it with our SUGCON sites in the very beginning. Now, on the other hand, here on the right side, you can have the approach that we chose last, basically, which is you can have a unified and centralized implementation for the sites, and then share commonly the same UI, design, and functionality. And this approach definitely allows a simplified maintenance in terms of coding, but also build in deployments. So there could be good reasons to go for either the one or the other. So there's no good and bad in this situation here. You can also mix both approaches like we did, right? Remember, the MVP side is still on .NET Core. It's still a dedicated head implementation, and it is within the same solution. So both can be fine. You just have to ask yourself, basically, how different are the UI designs? How different is the functionality really? And do you really require to duplicate code? Because that leads then to potentially fixing bugs several times. Okay, so that's the first consideration when dealing with multi-sites in XM Cloud. A second thing is, like, when you build something, you also want to roll out your site, right? Remember, you have different regions, you have different brands. So usually you start with one website, which is kind of your MVP implementation. And then once that is successful, you gain knowledge in that project, that might be your first XM Cloud project or like something like that, you're ready to roll out more sites. And that could be your regional websites, as mentioned, your brand websites or campaign sites or whatever. Therefore, you usually create a so-called template site from your first site, which uses or contains the most common things and features across all sites, so that you have an easy start with rolling out your next site with the least efforts, basically, and not starting from scratch each time. And then once you have that, from that template, you can go on and roll out site by site. Now, what we did with the SUGCON site was pretty much similar. So we started, as mentioned, with a SUGCON Europe site, and we did not create the template site because we used the SUGCON Europe site as the template for all the other sites because they were very, very similar. Usually you would start your project with maybe the smallest website or the least risky website. But as mentioned, we started with the SUGCON Europe site because it was a first event in the year. Sorry. So you can have two approaches on achieving that. There is a feature called Clone Site. It has been there since a while. It's not a dedicated XM Cloud feature. And you can have site templates. Now let's have a look into both of them. When we talk about the Clone Site feature, what you are actually doing is building a so-called template site, which means you build an actual website as a most common starting point for all your websites of a certain type. Again, could be a regional website, could be a campaigns website, or whatever you have to roll out. So a very common content architecture, common page designs, common features that can be pre-configured already. And as you've seen in the SUGCON project, this is usually derived from your first website implementation. And once your template site is set up, you can run the so-called clone site script in Content Editor, which will create an exact copy and resolves all the references inside to link properly. If you think of regional websites, you might also want to support different languages. So you can additionally run the add site language script, and this will add a language to it. It doesn't translate it, but it creates a language version per content item. As mentioned, that's already available in XM and XP and comes with the SXA module, the Sitecore Experience Accelerator. Now, the other option, and that's XM Cloud only, is to build a site template. And what you would do here is you would create an installation description that consists of modules. And you can reuse the modules that you have created along with the features. Again, modules are a feature of SXA. We will talk about modules a few slides ahead. And yeah, you would also add then this installation description, and you can create, for example, an installation description for the content architecture as well. You can even run PowerShell scripts, so you can do pretty much everything in that kind of installation description. And this site template will be available then afterwards in XM Cloud sites. So you have a screenshot here on the right side. So in that list of sites, you can add more, and your marketers can easily use that to spin up new sites. Of course, all the routing has to be configured afterwards, but I think that's a very user-friendly way of creating those sites. All right. Yeah, there are a couple of more multi-site features that we also take a look into, starting with a list here. So I mentioned already that you can create and manage multiple sites in XM Cloud using sites and site collections. XM Cloud Sites is a dashboard to keep an overview about your large-scale environment. In there, you can configure sites rather than in configuration files, which is easier to be accessed and easier to maintain. You can use the shared site feature. You can share common content, configuration, and simplify the maintenance of the website. You can easily link across sites. There's a site manager that helps you maintain the routing of your sites. We talked about modules that helps you improve the site administration, like how to activate features to a site. And you can create site-related roles that users can only access certain sites that they should work on. But yeah, I mean, let's have a closer look on all of them, starting with XM Cloud Sites. Now, XM Cloud Sites is the entry point for a marketer and technologist as well to work on experiences. Especially in large-scale environments, you can easily find sites using the search that has been added recently. So if you have a lot of sites, sometimes it can be hard to find them. Search helps you with that. You can create and manage your sites from here and directly navigate to XM Cloud pages, like just click on one of those site tiles here. And you can also enable the shared site feature and do some other configuration directly within that application. So that has been all surfaced in XM Cloud sites that used to be done in items or even previously in configuration files. Talking about configuration, you can administer your site managing the host, the languages, and also all other site-related settings that have been surfaced here so far. So I would say the most common used. So that all can be done via the site configuration or site definition here in XM Cloud Sites. Within the site context, you can create content centrally. So it can be used within one site, talking about sharing content here. So that's a common feature in XM. It was there in XP, and of course, it's also there in XM Cloud. So this simplifies usually the content management a lot, especially when you have to change content. You do that once at one place, and it applies wherever it's used. But sometimes you have content that is used even by multiple sites, and that can be something like global marketing content or something like terms and conditions. Now, XM Cloud offers the capability to mark a site as shared and use that content across sites. Again, this has been there in XM and XP alongside the additional module of SXA. So not only content can be shared, but also configurational items controlled by developers, something like the component variation that usually need to be configured. You can create that in one site and share that across sites. So that usually simplifies the maintenance here. Page and partial designs can be created in one site and shared across sites. So common, which usually represent common page layouts like blogs or even header and footer would be realized in page and partial designs. Yeah, styling options can be offered through rendering parameters. So you can also control like the design of components with that. You can control what components are offered to the marketers. through available renderings, or even control the availability of components per placeholder using the placeholder settings. Again, also this can be maintained centrally and then shared across all the sites within that site collection. You can share redirect maps, and of course you have your page templates usually created on a site collection level. So these are also logically shared across your sites within one site collection. Let's talk about cross-site linking. Sometimes you need to link across sites, which is the title of this slide. So this can always be done via absolute links, of course, but when a page moves, that absolute link is no longer valid. So you would have to maintain, for example, a redirect or a rewrite or something like that. With XM Cloud, you can link across sites, keeping the relative information and transferring that later into an absolute URL. And that's done automatically for you. So you reference an item and XM Cloud is handling the rest. So in XM Cloud, you would mark a site as linkable, so they potentially become visible for other sites as targets to be linked to. And per site, you can select if you want to see only the site internal pages to link to, if you want to see pages of other sites within your site collection that have been marked as linkable, or all pages within your whole XM Cloud instance that have been marked as linkable. Again, not a pure XM Cloud feature. This has been there with the SXA module for XM and XP. All right, the Site Manager, a well-hidden tool, but still useful. So within the desktop app in XM Cloud, as well as XM and XP, under the PowerShell toolbox, you can find the Site Manager. And this tool, or this administration tool, helps you to get an overview about the routing using different domains, subdomains, or virtual folders. So sometimes you come across a problem where a certain URL is not resolved right, and you don't see the pages you intend to see. And usually my first way is to look into the Site Manager to see if my site is actually resolved the right way. And using the traffic light icons that you can see here, the Site Manager indicates whether a site can be accessed through the configured routing or not. So in here, you can directly resolve the conflicts by, usually you would configure a proper host or virtual folder. You can also just quickly move the site up and down in the order of how it's going to be resolved to fix that immediately. Right. I talked about modules before, so let's have a slightly deeper look into that. Again, this is an SXA feature, so it comes with XM, XP when you have the additional module SXA. In XM Cloud, it's inbuilt. So when building new features that consist of several configuration items, such as templates or renderings or media library items and some more, these can be bundled into modules. And usually what you have done in the past is you had to install that, or like have to add things to every site. But that can be quite error prone because you might forget, and the larger the environments get, the more sites you have, the more complicated it gets. So modules help you with that. So you can install modules on one or many sites, which means you have an installation description of a bundle of features that you can define, and this handles the activation of the feature within the sites for you. So the creation of items, basically. So during the site setup, but also anytime later, you can select what modules you want to install to a site. And this way you kind of decouple the deployment of a feature to your XM Cloud instance from actually activating that feature. So you can do that from the view of the site. So you can have a look on what modules have not yet been installed to that site, and then install whatever you need. Or you go the other way around, go to a module and see what sites do not yet have that module, and then publish that basically, or install that or activate that to those sites. So that's quite a powerful feature in terms of administering sites in XM, XP with SXA or XM Cloud. And also one that's not dedicated to XM Cloud, but still worth to mention, There are usually two reasons why you want to apply roles to your sites. On the one hand, if you only show the authors and marketers what's relevant to them, imagine again, you have a large environment with hundreds of sites. They're much more focused and not overwhelmed by the size of the implementation. So keep them focused. On the other hand, allowing only access to some particular sites mitigates the risk of having content created in other areas where it doesn't belong. So it definitely makes sense to set up rights and roles. And within XM Cloud or SXA, you can generate those standalone roles or a set of roles that's commonly used, like an admin role, an author role, a designer role, or just a member role. And you can fine-tune them later on, or of course, as always, you can create complete custom roles with whatever access you want to give to them. Right. So that's about the features. But now we also have to talk about deployment of multi-site solutions. And to get into things, let's have a close look on what parts do we find in an XM Cloud setup and what it consists of. So there are several parts we can deploy to. So let's start looking at those. So we have, on the one hand, we have the core application, which basically is our authoring environment. We're able to customize it through code deployments. However, be very careful with that. We clearly don't recommend that, even though you could. And there are definitely more sustainable ways of augmenting your authoring activities. Also, auto updates might be on risk if you do some customizations to the XM Cloud instance. The core application also holds all items that relate to your sites. And additionally, XM Cloud contains one or more node-based servers, the so-called editing host, that run your head application for the purpose of serving you what you see is what you get editors like XM Cloud Pages, for example. For any public traffic, you want to host your head application on a rendering host. Different providers have different features, but usually they all care about scaling out your front-end hosting based on the incoming traffic and based on your budget. We will talk about hosting providers at the end of this presentation. In your code solution, that is usually based on the XM Cloud Starter Kit, and it contains the code to customize your XM Cloud instance. Again, be careful with that. You can do that, you shouldn't. It contains your item configuration, basically, and then it contains the code for your front-end applications. And that can be in .NET Core. Rob Earlham and Ivan Likens recently released the SDK for .NET Core and the Starter Kit. Angular has been released now recently for XM Cloud. It's still in beta, I think, but yeah, it's there. And then Next.js, a Starter Kit and SDK is the most advanced one we still have. Now, when you deploy, you can deploy your XM Cloud Core and deserialize your items from your solution to your XM Cloud instance to serve the configuration of your features and sites. Additionally, you want your front-end app to stay in sync with your configuration items, so you also deploy your applications to the internal as well as potentially external editing hosts, right? So if we run .NET Core, you don't have an internal one set up for you, but you can still run an external editing host for that purpose. And finally, you deploy your front-end application to your rendering host, so the changes are also visible for the public. Again, why am I telling all of that? There are basically two ways offered of building your deployment pipelines. The first one is using the out-of-the-box pipeline, which is the one you want to go for. However, you can also build your own custom pipeline, and the XM Cloud CLI, the command line interface, gives you all of the commands that you need to deploy to the dedicated parts of the XM Cloud instance. So if your scenario is supported, and we talk about why it could be not supported, but if it's supported, you should definitely go with the out-of-the-box XM Cloud deployment pipeline. your project will be connected to your source code repository when you set everything up, and each branch can be hooked up with an environment. So when you change something and commit that to one of those branches, this triggers a deployment to the connected environment. And it's as easy as that. It's a 5-minute setup, and then you're done. So this gets constantly improved by us, and you're benefiting from all the efforts we put in. It's the least effort you can have, so why not go for it? Well, if you are not using GitHub or Azure DevOps, Azure, what's the name, for hosting your source code solution, then, well, we don't offer anything else out of the box. So that might be one reason to use our CLI. And when you use something that's not running on a node-based editing host, then you also need to use the command line interface and build your custom deployment pipeline, which is fine. I mean, so if you have those differing requirements, you can build your custom pipeline with any tooling like GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps. The XM Cloud CLI offers all required commands. It will be also continued and developed by us even further. And so if you want to orchestrate your own build and deployment pipeline, you can easily do that. We had to create our own pipeline using GitHub Actions as well in the SUGCON project because we had the .NET Core editing and rendering host for the MVP side. So that basically required us to use that. So in the project that you find on GitHub, open source, you will also find everything to set up the GitHub Actions pipeline for that project. Okay, last but not least, we should talk about the head application hosting. And for sure, there's no question on that Vercel is the maintainer for Next.js, and Next.js is the most advanced SDK and starter kit that we currently offer. So Vercel is definitely a great choice for hosting your XM Cloud Run head application. And also XM Cloud has a native integration to connect to Vercel. So there's a few button clicks where you can directly out of the XM Cloud deploy app, deploy to Vercel and set up this whole connection. So you don't have to do that manually. But your requirements are unique. So what you need to do is rather check the features that's offered by each provider. So do they offer advanced support for front-end framework features, something like incremental static generation? Do you even need that? Middleware, serverless functions, something like that. But also, how's the developer experience? A very big one is like, what are the costs, right? So I think Vercel might be the most expensive one. So therefore, it might make sense to take a look at the others as well. And what about scalability? And when you evaluate for an enterprise setting, make sure you look for security, single sign-on integration, dedicated customer support. And last but not least, you need to weigh out what's most important for you and your current project that you're working on. I hope those questions help you and yeah, decide for head application hosting. We're coming to an end. So to summarize, when planning your multi-site implementation with XM Cloud, check if you can build using one app serving all sites, or if you need to have one dedicated app per site. You might even need to mix the approaches in some cases, which is fine. We did that as well. It works perfectly fine. Another question is, can you go with the out-of-the-box deployment pipeline, or do you need to orchestrate a custom pipeline? Make use of the rollout feature using site cloning or site templating, and yeah, choose your hosting provider based on your needs. With all that said, here's a link to a blog post that elaborates on that topic, but most important, it provides a list of resources that I compiled to generate or create that deck here and that presentation. So there's a video building the CI/CD pipeline by Rob Earlham, for example, linked in that. There is a link for the XM Cloud introduction repo, which holds the implementation for the SUGCON and MVP sites. There's a video about hosting providers as Next.js hosting alternatives by Thomas Desmond, and some other links to our documentation, the role setup, and all of that. So yeah, maybe worth to check out. And with that said, yeah, thanks a lot. I hope that was valuable time spent for you during your lunchtime, and you got some takeaways, and I'm now open for questions.
Thanks, Sebastian. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, either put your hand up or put things in the chat. I know it's a really good talk. I've been in a similar position. I've done like multi-sites on XM Cloud too, so it's good to see how it's progressed, because I did it about a year and a bit ago. So there's new features in there, really good. My initial question was like, what were your biggest challenges? Because obviously there's the tech going on, and obviously utilizing the tech, but then there's obviously trying to get X amount of content, X amount of editors to all come along with you on that journey and try to get those sites live. So what were your biggest challenges, would you say?
So I think managing the editors was not a big deal, because we have done that in the past, and that's pretty basic XMXP stuff, as I mentioned before, right? The whole roles and rights concept, that's all pretty basic. One thing we faced was working in an agile setup, and having the items and the feature implementations go together, which means everyone needs to go basically serialize down the items that they need for their features. Now the problem comes here, where if you are working in a SaaS setup, you share one instance, because not everyone gets an own SaaS-based XM Cloud instance, but you can only serialize down everything or nothing, right? And then you have to cherry pick what you need. The alternative is spinning up XM Cloud in Docker, which is, let's phrase it like that. I try to avoid that. So I tend to work just setting up my app locally and connect that to the XM Cloud instance, and try to avoid setting up Docker as much as I can, because it's still too much magic involved in there, and certain surprising errors that I never faced before. So that's what I would call challenging, because you have to rethink a bit of your processes. What I would usually do is, for a sprint, for example, have someone creating all the items, and then they can do that in a dev environment in XM Cloud, and then serialize that down, ship it. Usually it doesn't destroy anything, even if your feature is not finished, right? So if you add a template that's never picked up, if you add a rendering item that's never added to a site through the available renderings, well, it's just an item that's never been used. So you can, like, if you're not going to make use of it, you can still remove it at a certain point of time. There are rare cases where well, that's a problem, where when you change, for example, a field in the template or something like that. But if you just add something, well, it doesn't hurt if you separate that kind of work. So that's one thing that we struggled with, not really solved, but I would have solved it the way I just described. Another thing that I haven't here in this presentation, but when you go with the solution where you have one app serving all sites, so the one that we have set up right now, you will run into an issue with handling the not found page. So XM Cloud and also SXA have a feature inbuilt for handling the not found page. So you can define a page that is your 404 page, and then you configure that page to show up whenever a URL cannot be resolved. That doesn't work when you set up one app for all sites. So you have to find a different solution in there. It works if you have a dedicated app per site, but not the other way around. So that's something to definitely know. It's not fixed on the SUGCON sites. You can still experience that issue. So you will always see the 404 page of the European site, no matter on which site you are. Not a big thing, I would say, but yeah, this is what I would call the challenges. Other than that, if you're not used to XM Cloud or any of the XM, XP, Sitecore ecosystem, then for sure there might be more challenges. But if you have been in that space for a long time, it's all very familiar, I would say.
Okay. How long did it take to get all those sites live? As a matter of fact,
So getting the first site live took us maybe for a month or something like that. But it's not like we worked like a real project team, 8 days, 8 hours a day, like 5 days a week, something like that. It was like everyone was doing it in the spare time, right? So that therefore it took longer. It could have been done in, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks maybe. The SUGCON sites aren't really big. It's a couple of renderings, no real special requirements with integrations or anything, which usually can cost, which can have some efforts added to it. So that's pretty straightforward if you dedicate your entire time on it. But the way we did it, yeah, it was a little bit longer, but we managed to have it live before the SUGCON in April, which was good. So
yeah, no, my experience is you normally have two sites up and running, don't you? So you've got the live version and the one you're building. So the team can never be 100% on it because there's still that tiny element of keep the old site spinning, keep going. No matter how much you put blackouts and things like that on it, you still need editing. So yeah, that's good to hear.
I was pretty surprised though when, I mean, in my career, I brought some sites live on Sitecore or other CMS systems, and it usually is quite some effort with people involved, like from the infrastructure teams doing all the DNS setup and stuff like that. We did it with Vercel. I don't want to promote Vercel too much here. I believe it's also simple with other vendors, but it was really like one person doing it, I don't know, in 5 to 10 minutes and waiting for all browsers to refresh and I don't know. Yeah, it was really, really simple to bring those sites live compared to what I experienced like maybe 10 years from now. That surprised me. And what I really liked, even though we didn't use it here, is usually the deployment setup, right? If you just hook up your repository and a certain branch with one environment and it triggers automatically the deployment. I can remember where we had like tasks in our sprints of like 2 weeks or even putting it in the next week to set up this deployment pipeline for a team of 2 or 3 people doing that. And now you just do it in 5 minutes. So that's what I really like about this setup, to be honest.
Brilliant. Has anyone got any other questions? There's nothing in the chat other than people saying.
I do have a question. I mean, firstly, thanks, Sebastian, very helpful. Coming back to the choice of single app for multiple sites or apps per site, if you're going down the apps per site route, is there anything that you need to change in the Foundation Head repository to support that? Or does that repository support both modes by itself?
As far as I know, it does support it out of the box. The only thing we had to tweak is during, so we are using GitHub Actions. So we had to set up the, we had to set up that we deploy to dedicated node servers inside of XM Cloud so that there are dedicated node servers spun up. And the other thing we had to consider is, as we still wanted to keep the Docker setup alive, then you also need dedicated containers for your editing or rendering hosts for the dedicated sites. But as far as I remember, that's all. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick.
No one else jumping in. And I have a go. You talked a bit about the different ways of copying content with the clone site versus the site templates. Or probably content is probably the wrong term then, but things in content databases. Is there a kind of rule of thumb for why I'd pick one of them in any given situation?
So I personally prefer the clone site feature. It's much easier for me because I can handle each site just like a normal site. I define the designs with what you see is what you get, right? Using Pages or Experience Editor and all of that, I can configure it the way I want to. However, right now, this way does not appear in XM Cloud sites. So it's not listed as a site template there, which is a pity, I would say, because if we could just surface it there, it would be a perfect combination. Like if you want to have your marketers create new sites and not go into Content Editor anymore to run a script there, then you probably need to go for the site templating at the moment,
Right.
Which is what I experienced, way more effort and way more abstract than creating just a site that you clone from. Because it's an installation description and you benefit from the modules that you created before for your features if you did that. But then setting up your content structure and your content architecture, or pre-setting it up, because maybe your site always has the first 2 levels of navigation, it's always the same, or some other content stuff like layouts are always the same, or maybe the header and footer look the same. Then this needs to be described through modules, and you might end up writing PowerShell scripts for that, which can be fine. It depends on your comfort zone. But for me, it's much easier to just do it in what you see is what you get way on the side. So I've talked to the site's product team to also bring the ability to have the clone site feature embedded in XM Cloud Sites, because I personally think that's a perfect combination. But yeah, I think it's more like, if developers do it, then I would say go for the clone site script. If your marketers want to do that, even though someone has to configure all the routing anyway, and you want to surface that in XM Cloud Sites, then yeah, then you have to decide for the other one. As of now, right?
Yeah. I guess with all the discussions about UI change for the future, that's not necessarily going to stand long term, but right now,
Exactly.
that makes sense.
What drives the difference between what is shown in that XM Cloud Sites feature, whether you've got them in there or within the site manager? Are they still just pointing to the same item instances representing your sites, or are they entirely separate?
They're entirely separate. So your clone site is just a site as any other site, right? It lives aside your other sites within the same site collection, or even outside. And then everything that's regarding your site templates, or what you get surfaced in XM Cloud Sites, is living in the modules. So in system settings, and then probably feature or foundation or something like that, or project folder. And then you have a dedicated item that represents that visualization in XM Cloud Sites, basically. So if you have that item, it appears, and you can provide a thumbnail for it, but you need to hook it up with your installation description, basically, with your module that needs to run when you click on that item, basically, or when you choose it. Yeah.
But the sites themselves, they're still sitting under the site alongside each other in the content.
The sites do, but the modules not, right? If you go with site templating and the XM Cloud Sites ability to create new sites, then this is not a site that is in the background.
Yeah.
Unless you have a PowerShell script that picks up that site and makes a copy of it and handles all the re-referencing internally, right? So that doesn't link to its origin anymore.
Okay.
Brilliant. Has anyone got any other questions?
I can chuck a very speculative one in if no one else has got anything to bring up.
Go on.
So I had a customer recently who was talking about hosting for heads, who brought up the concept of OpenNext, which is basically somebody's attempt to work out what the cell are doing in their infrastructure and provide you the technology to run that yourself. Is anyone talking about that internally at Sitecore as a future possibility, or is this going to fall fairly in the pile of stuff we've heard about and nodded at, but we won't support?
So I have heard about Sitecore offering hosting. I've also heard that it somehow disappeared, and I'm not sure how much of it was MVP content or not. So I leave it like that. So it has been an idea. I've never heard about it again. I personally think, sure, there is this cost connected to it, but there's a reason to the cost. Someone put effort in making it so smooth and easy. Replicating all of that, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that pays off at the end, to be honest. Really needs to be evaluated properly. I mean, I've even, sorry to go into a different direction, but I've been with a client that evaluated writing their own CMS, and they've been with Sitecore before, and they thought they can do better. And I thought, this is a really stupid idea. I mean, they will make the same mistakes Sitecore has run through in the past 20 years. So why?
But you know that everything in IT is circular. And when I started building websites, we were in the every client has their own CMS that's been built custom for them, and we've gone around this loop to them being giant industrial products. Surely we're going to go back round to the personal micro CMS again at some point. But yeah, good point about the risks of that. But I mean, absolutely, cost is the thing. I agree with your point that Vercel charge a lot because they do a lot, but I know people the things like their bandwidth charges have bitten people and have caused
I mean, it's always a question on what you really need out of the feature set that they provide, because you pay at the end for everything that they provide, even though you only need a subset, right? And that's the same with XM Cloud. It's the same with XM XP. If you bought an XP license and you don't need any of the experience features, and that sits with a lot of our customers, they're attracted by that, but they're not using it. So if you at the end need a simple content management system, maybe even a headless one, then you're much closer to implementing that yourself, even though there are vendors out there that have done that for you already for a much cheaper price, like XM Cloud. So it really makes sense to, like, if you go for such a CMS, it makes sense to use a majority of the features. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, unless anyone's got anything else. Oh, Nick.
Nick.
Well, speaking of using sort of XM Cloud sites to potentially allow marketers to go in there and spin up sites or create new ones, I'm just having a little around in there, and in general, there's a big button that says Danger Zone and Delete Collection. Is there any plans to start to introduce more granularity and permissions into some of the applications like XM Cloud sites?
I don't know, to be honest. I want to keep it as short as it is. I can't. It totally makes sense, and I totally agree to that, but I haven't heard of making this granularity happen here.
From the outside perspective, there were a couple of things discussed at Symposium about improving the security model for XM Cloud. There wasn't really any detail, so I don't know whether it specifically covers that as an issue. But the vague comment I heard from in one of the presentations was that the people understand that we've been used to this very, very granular security model where you can literally control what individual buttons a person can see, and then suddenly that all goes away in the cloud, and there must be a middle ground of enough control to be helpful, but not making their internal infrastructure too complicated.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing that just comes to my mind is at the end, when hitting the button, it will delete items. And if you don't have access to this item, I would expect that at the end, nothing happens, but I would have to try that. So, yeah.
Just don't try it on production.
Yeah.
No, for sure not.
It's like when you go to buildings and you've got the fire escape button next to the door open button, and you're like, if you hit the wrong one, you're going to like set the fire on. Yeah, I get it. Brilliant. Okay, it was 4 minutes to go. No, thank you very much, Sebastian, for coming on. It's been a very interesting talk. I'm sure everyone who's been on the call has enjoyed it as well.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, fantastic. Yeah. Thanks, Sebastian.
Yeah, you're welcome. Was fun, and hope you have a calm week, ending your year and going into vacation. I believe not, because a lot needs to be finished up. But yeah, get through it, survive it, and then see you next year.
Definitely. Brilliant. No, thanks very much. And like I said, we'll be back in January with an in-person event too. But yeah, thanks to everyone for attending, and on behalf of our group anyway. Hope everyone has a good Christmas and festive break too.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Brilliant. All right, cheers everyone.
Bye.